those of you, my name's Bob Walton.
And I'm Sue Hill.
And together we work together as the Right Box. And we're really delighted to be emceeing this celebration of poetry this afternoon. Poetry, the Severn Bridge, we've called it. It's been a dream of mine for a long time to be able to make that bridge between South Wales and the Bristol area. I've been travelling back and forth all my life since the earliest photograph of myself as a chubby 6 months old on Weston-super-Mare Beach. So the theme, that's a general theme, but the poets will go in any direction that they like. Will be taking us in all sorts of directions this afternoon.
Okay, so just to underline today's theme, I'd like to mention that Bob, originally from Cardiff, and I'm a Westonian, born and bred, and I still live in Weston-super-Mare now. So we do bridge the Severn, working together as the Right Box. We facilitate creative writing workshops, projects and events, mostly in Weston and North Somerset, but we also run a bi-monthly online speakeasy poetry night, which is featuring poets from all across the UK. So I'm going to start the ball rolling with a short poem that I wrote from Weston-super-Mare coastline, looking out over to Wales and the bits that are in between. It's called Home from Home. Look out from the promenade of Weston-super-Mare. He's there. Join me. Follow my eyes. See what I see. Through layer by layer, from the shore to where he sits. Lugworms stipple the damp sand in curls of existence. A Fimbria of shingle, crushed, battered and scattered. Puddles of abandoned ocean, trapped till high tide. A thick, mottled clinch of captivating mudflats. Foamy-edged waves await a nod from the moon. Tiptoeing seagulls in pursuit of a fish supper. A textured body of solid blue sea glistening. Then the mystical whale-shaped hole, ready to release a watery squirt of breath. Okay, so we'd like to open this afternoon's bridge building with Caleb Parking. As many of you know, Caleb is not only a poet and performer, he's also a facilitator, educator, filmmaker, researcher and activist with a major interest in eco and queer themes. He was Bristol's official city poet from 2020 until 22, and his collected city poet commissions were published last year in all the cancelled parties. He's been a guest poet on Radio 4's Poetry Please and won second prize in the National Poetry Competition and first prize in Winchester Poetry Prize. Caleb holds an MSc in creative writing for therapeutic purposes, is currently a PhD candidate at Exeter University and tutors for the Poetry Society, Poetry School and Cheltenham Festivals. Caleb's first full collection was the wonderful This Fruiting Body, and his second collection, Mingle, will appear in October 24. He is also, in his own words, a radio listener, dog lover, bike rider, leaflet giver, patterned short wearer, errant giggler and frequent chatterer. We'd also like to add he's a linguistic trapeze artist, a fire eater of words, and often a hilarious clown of the topsy-turvy and a ringmaster of the imagination. So take it away, Caleb.
Sometimes you forget get things you've written in biogs or on your own website, and then it's sort of simultaneously gratifying and mortifying to sit and listen to those things with additions. Thanks for the embellishments. I'm feeling a bit scattered today, so that was quite a nice, being my hype person, so appreciate it. Good, so I'm going to share with you some work from this fruiting body, which the more astute among you will notice is also the jacket I'm wearing. Yes, I had a jacket printed, and I have garments for each of my book covers. There will be costume changes. So a few from that, and then there's going to be some from The Coin, which was a pamphlet I published with Broken Sleep last year in October, and then I'm going to share some new poems that are scattered around from Mingle, which is the new collection. I still love the title, so that's a good sign, because I'm going to have to live with it for a while. And then one city poet piece to finish, which felt apposite. So, I'm going to start at the end of the collection. There's a number of museum poems in this collection, and this one was Guardian Poem of the Week. And a top tip, if you have that privilege and pleasure, then be mindful of how you engage with the comments, because it's all going on in there. I didn't interact. I just read the comments, but people have a lot of opinions about poems, don't they? Anyway, opinions. So this was written in the Horniman Museum, summer 2019, and it's called Please Do Not Touch the Walrus or Sit on the Iceberg. It references the 1997 blockbuster Titanic and the characters in it, Rose and Jack. I mean, it would be astonished if someone hasn't seen that, but well done you if you haven't. But yeah, so it references that. So I clamber up on top of the fiberglass plinth, rise from the chevrons of the parquet floor as though it melted into thick, cold waves, and I emerge, triumphant and substantial, hear my epic belly boom on the fake ice, hands slapping flatly on the hollow berg. Relaunch my fingers as weighty webbed fins before I tackle his avuncular mass, high-five his suedy and ample rump. Together, am I getting some feedback? Together on our tiny island, I offer my new form to brisk expanses, the gritty battlegrounds of Arctic beaches. My chest proud and lifted as a dormant volcano. Then my incisors extend, telescopic, tusks prodding at my clavicle bones, whiskers, these exhilarating bristles of whisker tickle out from the prow of my titanic mass. We are in tandem, a double-breasted catamaran. We are Rose and Jack on our own luxury boat. And when staff approach, with their lanyard spears, their hunters' walkie-talkies, to stare up at the hull of our little world, our Oscar-nominated forever, I'll look down through blubbering eyes and briny breathlessness, then whisper in impeccable walrus, I'm flying. There's quite a grainy version of Titanic there. I'm wondering, is there anything I can do to lessen this crackly scenario? Actually, I'm going to try without, and then at the back, please let me know if you can't hear me, but I will belt it. So, can you hear me if I speak like this? Yes, okay, good. Technology's good when it works, isn't it? Okay.
Sorry about that, Caleb.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it happens. So this one was in an anthology called 100 Queer Poems, and I didn't consider it a particularly queer poem until Andrew Macmillan and Mary Jean Chan selected it to go in that anthology, and I was like, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Which is nice. Other people having a much clearer sense of your work than you do, always, I think. So, Spiral Shell. It's in the voice of all the shells on a beach. Spiral Shell. We, the dead, in constellations of mollusk clutter, scattered on this grainy nether sky of sand. For some time we felt agreeably empty here, in this pearlescent afterlife, innumerable, smattered as cheap shell suits or storm systems. We were the houses, not the tenants. We were mantle-built homes, the 3D printed caravan masses and unhurried seabeds gastropod traffic. Ancient as ammonite in Cambrian seas, fresh as ragged gaps in garden leaves, with a gathering of moments into ages. and we spiral like the whirls behind tankers, helter-skelter at ocean's edges. We are the clarion call of the conch in a sunrise radiant as a yellow cockle. Now we've nowhere to go, dissolve into particulate futures, as you crunch across us, helixes shattered by heels, forgetting each of us is an epic. And this one is one of the garden poems in the collection, of which there are a few, and it's an epistolary poem, which means it's in a letter form. My mother-in-law has heard this, and she found it amusing, and she is indeed an amazing horticulturalist, but it's not really about her, I was hastening, quick to add when she heard it. Dear horticultural mother-in-law, since your visit, we've continued beheading the uninvited. We took your advice because if there was a fifth beetle of the Gardener's Question Time panel, then you'd be it. The garden certainly is a fuller and more genteel green. Fewer scarlet lily beetles wage war. Though as yet I have been too lily-livered to execute them with my thumbnail, as you do. Instead, I sandwiched them between a flat rock and the paving slabs, push hard through my rubber soles until... Have you noticed how each lets out a metallic shriek before that unequivocal crunch? After you left, we found two of them at it, brazen, on the tattered leaf they called home and lunch and bed. How could anything evolve to be so garish and brittle, so conspicuous against its habitat? Have you noticed how the lily beetles topple theatrically from leaf to ground and then waggle their crowd of legs? How, in camouflaged cul-de-sacs, two-man households like this can feel so suddenly uncovered? Mother-in-law, I see now it can't be lily and beetle, beetle with lily, beetle on lily. It's one or the other. Our fond warfare here in this well-mannered patch of green flecked with red. From the coin, and you'll notice. Yes, I got a t-shirt made. I'm just going to read you a few of these. The first and last act as kind of bookends, so I think they're nice ones to read, and then a couple in between. And then I want to read some new poems, because that's fun, isn't it? I've got these and this ribbon body here, by the way, if you want to buy any off me. And if there's reception, then you can use your card. If there's not, we'll barter or something, I don't know. Okay. A quote from Oscar Wilde. All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his. The coin. Nevertheless, I breeze through the world's emporia, equipped with tidbits of finely diced life, whiffled under servers' noses. Hummingbird, raptor, hunter of chatter. I flit between tills, hands not reflected in their counters. My mother's grip lingers on receipts like a life jacket, longing to thumb flick a crumb, a morsel, bait. Now I go into the cut-price smiles of chemists and butchers with intent, conjure snippets with overwrought gestures, offer a coin to every stranger, daring them to flip it. Hating ferrets comes from the canonical tale where a ferret bit into the bone of Mum's hand. As she tells it, that bastard thing hung from her digit, blood rivulets along its length, incisors embedded as she reached for the shotgun. One of those Elmer Fudd type double-barreled numbers, or so I imagine it. She aimed it point blank at the ferret, which, for dramatic purposes, I'm assuming was white. Somehow, she pulls that other arm back far enough, now Diana the Huntress with added Rambo, and fires. The rest is implied in silhouette, but likely included a lot of cleaning up, both human and, to a differing extent, ferret. Designer socks. A tradition For several years, when on Christmas Eve, Mum carefully snipped the plastic tags off each pair from the pound shop, then artfully mismatched them. Stripes disrupting spots, geometric with a festive clash. I forget which configuration of family we were then, but all those socks got tombolaed in the same washing machine drum, and we'd spend all year redesigning them. Good Friday in Mum's shed. Sifting hammerheads, flat-tired bikes, boxes and boxes of fabric scraps. We stand back, regard all these categorised stacks on the green lawn, and place things with others in some way like them. And while we do, I recall the casual way she said over dinner last night that if this doesn't work this time, she won't go through that treatment again. And then busily she shows us more boxes of bargain fabrics, some overgrown with embroidered flowers, and another printed with sprinting hairs. And we all head off to bed to dream in frayed patchworks, slackening stitches. And the last one, so this has a story related to Clifton Litfest. It's called The Pattern. I read it here. It's kind of about knitting. It's inspired by a famous piece of graffiti that's my mum's favourite piece of graffiti, which was London, late 70s, and it said, "My mother made me a homosexual." And underneath someone responded, "If I gave her the wool, would she make me one too?" And then what happened, I'll read the poem and then I'll tell you the rest of it. The pattern. If she could, she'd knit you a boyfriend or a balaclava. She'd knit you a softer day, a longer year, a macrame life with a looser weave, a fingerless glove or new lover, a man or a mansion, if she could. But she'll knit anyway, from any old yarn and turn it into its opposite. Through endless TV murders, those needles banish death, their clickety-clacketing wishes summon cosy multiverses. And even though the twine might get slightly too tight, the ends slightly frayed, she'll knit with her every last synapse. Rest is off the table until it's all made wearable, bearable, understood. If you've got the will and she's got the wool, then she would. This was in Butcher's Dog, which is an amazing poetry journal, slightly longer one. I've got about 6.5 minutes, right? This was inspired, we went to Paris last December, which was delightful, and because it had an exhibition called Gold in capital letters, we went to the Musée Yves Saint Laurent, the Yves Saint Laurent Museum, if you will. Your actual French, to quote Kent Williams. And so I was inspired by that exhibition, and I really like gold. See the shoes. I didn't have time to do my nails, which was a shame. I would have done them gold. And so I was thinking about gold, and then I researched Fort Knox, which is obviously where the US gold stocks are kept. And this weird, what gold does, I think, is what I was interested in. So and it starts with an Yves Saint Laurent quote. "My fantasies and my very fertile imagination lead me to the Baroque. Gold. How it goes with everything. How I can possess it even though I cannot afford it. How it used to underpin economies. How Fort Knox will protect it long after the soils have sighed their final crops. How Acanthus mollis gilds its leaves in the sun. How we relocated Hollard's gold, and it wilted, then cascaded back from both beds. How only the carrot initiated can detect authenticity. How the world is awash in gorgeous fakery. How I have a matching notebook and pen and trainers in various shades of phony. How we adore it and perish in its name, its colour, its brilliance, its divine heaviness," that's Goldfinger. How in those bunkers, behind retinal scans and foot-thick steel, nobody will enjoy it, interred beneath the deluges. How on buttons it is the jewellery of daytime, how its stoppers eau de parfum, how each sequin shimmers eventually into the sea, how its variations are symphonic, how it draws attention to itself, how we mine for it still, mine, mine, mine. how it pierces under stage lights, explodes from disco balls, how it is stored away from coastlines, less vulnerable to enemy attack, how it is surprisingly soft, lame, brocade, leather, how it is protected by razor wire, how it is the measure and the rule, how it was the gift of wise men, how nobody can ever be as good as it, how several codes are needed for that vault, each held by a different official, how once we saw a watch in a jeweller's window worth more than our home, how actors in films bite at coins, how prospectors sifted the grains of themselves, how Scrooge McDuck, 90s kids, dove gleefully into it, how it lies always beneath us, how golden our hope is, approximately 7 inches long, 3.5 inches wide, 1 3/4 inches thick. So, just about time to do this one, which is, as someone said, it's a little bit sexy and a little bit scary. And I was like, that's being a gay man, I think, actually. It's in 21 poems about wonky animals. The Wonky Animals Collective I'm a part of write about animals and also support the Manor Farm Animal Sanctuary for wonky animals. My poem is called Hornet. Hench horror, I'd love to love you, but you've been at the roids again. Hyper-pumped, hitting this city for punishable flesh to pierce. You saw me once, in the shower, loomed thickly through steam, your stabby appendage strapped to that warning tape arse. So I crushed you in my swimmers, crunch against the glass. The heft of you, your freakish bulk. You are the gruff one in a zombie movie who wants to toss someone like me out the fortified gates. You're that boy who lobbed a basketball right at my face. Let me in, you say, thorax pulsing. See how magnificent I am in my mass, my fury. Good. And then to finish, hopefully just one city poet piece. Oh, I'm going to put the city poet garment on. There we go. So I had a hoodie made. The city poet artwork I got to commission, which is of a sad chihuahua in leather gear. Because at the Pride Dog Show, which I wrote my last piece about, there's this little dog called Jean-Philippe Picard. It's in the city poet book anyway. And was in a pram in leather gear, yapping at everyone. And so that was the cover artwork, and I love it, so I had it made into this. I'm not going to read that one, I'm actually going to read something significantly more serious. I was asked to write something for the 80th anniversary of the Atlantic Charter, which is a transatlantic naval accord. I had mixed feelings about this, as one might, about naval forces, transatlantically, etc. So I thought I'll write something in the model of something very lyrical. So I wrote it in the model of Macefield's Sea Fever, thinking that if people weren't actually listening to kind of what I was saying, they'd listen to how I was saying it. That was the idea. It's got a couple of different epigraphs. One is from The Ships of Theseus by Steve Gurker, and that is, every ship like a casket of words, bulkhead, transom, mast steps. The Ships of Theseus is a thought experiment that if Theseus kept replacing, in Greek mythology, replacing all the parts of his ship, would they then still be the same ship if all the parts were replaced? The same can also be said of the Sugar Babes, but they recently reformed, which blows the whole thing into disarray. And also the other pop cultural epigraph I used, which is Trigger in Only Fools and Horses, nodding, who said, "This old broom has had 17 new heads and 14 new handles in its time." The poem's called... Stop that one. Running over slightly. Peace building. To build a peace, you'll need heartwood timber from forests with a steady breath, and you'll sometimes need steel, the galvanized kind, shielding lights over turbulent decks. For a peace that's strong, build a singular hull, but with boundaries welded within, and a solid wisdom to endure the dark whirls, a knowledge that water will win. To build a peace, you'll need a rudder that holds firm to a stately stern, and a deft propeller to trouble the currents, a flag to welcome or warn. For a peace that endures, choose a sturdy design from a peace-wright's weathered hands, and the hands of the peace-wrecked, your peacemates too, gathered over peace-shaped plans. To build a peace, you'll need mast steps or crow's nest, a radar to broaden your view, and to heed the albatross's gossip, sense the squalls that swell within crews. For a peace that won't rot, weld 2 lucky coins beneath your peace's upright heart. Then renew each rusted bolt until peace, unfamiliar, gleams into port. Good.
Fantastic, Caleb. And it's one of the great features of Bristol that we have had 4 city poets over the last 7 years now, and Caleb just brought that role to life, I think, between 20 and 22 with the variety of poems that you produced, and obviously the next collection, Mingle, in next year will be, I think everybody will be dashing out to get that. Fantastic, yeah, great. Just about an hour before we started today, I fell into conversation outside with, Clifton has a lot of tourists. I fell into conversation with an American visitor, Mara, who's just come in this afternoon. She just had a few hours to spare in Clifton, having walked the southwest coast and coast path, and she asked me, so it's not very far from Bristol to South Wales, is it? And no, it's only about 9 miles by water. But aren't there some what are the cultural difficulties, differences? What are the cultural differences and similarities? I think it would take me a lifetime to answer that question. What are the cultural similarities and differences? We might ponder on that, but one of the things that we want to emphasise is it is not often that poets from South Wales come over to the Bristol area to read, and it's not often that poets from Bristol area go over to South Wales to read. And 9 miles of water, we've just got to overcome that. So we're going to, when I introduce Abir Amir, Abir is coming to us from Cardiff today, born in Sunderland but brought up in Cardiff, where she lives with her husband and her 2 sons. Abir trained as a dentist in London and completed her membership of the Royal College of Dental Surgeons in Edinburgh, and has an MSc in conscious sedation. So watch out. And Abir's poems have appeared in a huge range of journals in the last few years, since she started to gather the confidence with a few kicks up the backside, I think, from a few people to send them out. And suddenly the journals have been picking her poems up. And she received a Literature Wales Mentoring Scheme Award in 2020. And then her brilliant debut collection, Inhale Exile, published by Severn Books, was shortlisted for Wales Book of the Year 2022. Inspired by the story she heard as a child and visiting her family in Iraq as an adult, Inhale Exile celebrates the resilience of her forebears and extended family in Baghdad and around the world. Abir enjoys photography. She's a great photographer. Severn Books use quite a number of her photographs on their website. Islamic art, drawing and painting, as well as spirituality and religion, and Arabic language and culture. And finally, although Abir says she's a shy introvert, she thinks that there's a stand-up comedian inside waiting to get out. We'll see. Abir Amir.
So this is called The Reed, Flute and I, after Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. As the reed flute sings, you weep your sorrow. Your heart still beats in the place you left. The weight of your yesterdays that were once tomorrows halves you, just like the day the reed was cut, pulled from its bed, carved to carry the breath of the carver, to ears held far. Its inhale is your exhale, as if straight from your own chest. Its wails redden your eyes, its larynx speaks your exile. The same parting that split the reed from its bed brings you together, and you can't know until you've always known. When they said farewell, you bled so long, knowing you would not farewell, and still only long for the place your heart comes from. Reading in tongues, all music yearns for home. So I decided to share poems that were kind of relevant to how ordinary people are affected by war, and mainly Iraq, because that's where I'm from. So this is called The Social Worker. Ba'athists executed her brother, stole her home for the Tigris view. She retires to look over her shoulder, turns to the skill of two hands. Weaving and needlework intricate as memories of eyes looking to her. Files and papers bruised purple-green translate as beaded flowers, satin birds. Curved needles held in needle holders, stitch black silk in the skin of her chest, when cancer is found as lumps in the tissue of nodes under her arm and left breast. Cyclophosphamide vomits clumps from her hair. Radiotherapy burns wound edges. Her fingers still grasp the needle and thread to weave ballroom dancers in silk. When the bombs fall in desert storm, her nephews take her to Karbala to escape the bombs and quakes across Baghdad in the mother of all battles for Kuwait. Ceasefire. The nephew navigates cratered roads home. She's in the back of the white Toyota, breaths to fill her chest too labored to notice skies filled with black smoke. In and out of consciousness, the late stages, when she exhales her last drop of life, her body faces Mecca, she is released as clouds drop black rain on Baghdad. This next one, I was actually thinking of calling the book Green Ink, and I mentioned this to a mentor, and she was like, "Oh, green ink, yeah, green ink, you know." And I was like, "Yes, green ink." And she said, "Well, you know what it means, don't you?" And I was like, "No." And she said, "Well, it, you know, if you write complaint letters, you're the type that writes complaint letters, you usually do it in green ink. Or maybe multicolored, you know, where each letter is a different colour. Or also, there are links to the MI5, which I didn't know. But anyway, so this is green ink. Green ink, in the kind of Islamic world, the colour green is symbolic of peace. And my grandfather wrote in green ink. So this was about him. It's called Green Ink. The thin man in the three-piece suit is the only one who waits in a queue. Nobody else cares to take turns. He comes each year to register deferred entry for his daughter at Baghdad University, clings to the hope that dust can settle, things will get better, and his daughter and her husband can return. He writes her name, signs in green ink. At home, he settles into his fixing position. Crouched in his white dishtasha, glasses to the tip of his nose, he fixes irons and kettles, listens to the news on the radio. At war with brothers in Iran now. He smokes as he worries. Always wartime, it seems. His daughter in England savours each airmail letter, the smell of spent matches, deep inhale of green ink to capture his scent until he visits. It's been years. She kisses his hands as he gets off the coach from Heathrow, kerosene suitcase full of hand-weaved loofahs, date syrup, bricks of olive and bay leaf soap, the glass cups and saucers her mother sent. Black tea as he likes it, heaped sugar, a slice of lemon. He pours it into the saucer to let it cool and sips. Between visits and sips, hairs grey and wars end and begin. Saddam invades Kuwait. No contact as the bombs rain on Basra and Baghdad. Saddam takes revenge on rebels. Stories in parts. She hears he's passed and mourns her father though he lives. 6 months. She doesn't know until crossed lines transmit the echo of his voice. Soon, the same unsettled dust blocks his coronary arteries. His fountain pen dries. His pocket watch stops telling time. Exhale. A portrait of Saddam facing his hospital bed. This one is kind of about the language that's used. So this is a fairly new poem as well. It's called On Naming Things. On naming things. 7 syllables. Intergenerational. Unidentifiable. 6 syllables. Categorization. Dehumanization. 5 syllables. Annihilation. Indiscriminate. 4 syllables. Civilian. Uranium. Identity. Population. Eternity. Ubiquitous. 3 syllables. Genocide. Demagogue. Massacre. Refugees. Dialogue. Destruction. F-16. 2 syllables. Defeat. Weapons. Terror. Target. Sanctions. Hunger. Children. Trauma. Cancer. Symbol. Despair. Error. Worthless. Victims. Equal. Nothing. 1 syllable. Pain. Loss. Grief. Love. Lives. War. Numb. Tanks. Bombs. Flee. Where? Now. No. Hope. Left. They're all dead. At least. Name. Things. As. They. are. 0 syllables. This one is going to be a difficult one to read, I think, as well. This is called Aboud, which is a nickname for Abdullah in Iraq. And we were in Iraq, and my cousin was just counting the times. They were like competing between themselves, and my 2 cousins, about how many times they'd had kind of close calls. So this is about that. Aboud. He counts the times he's avoided death. He tells how, when he was 3 years old, they escaped to Najaf as the bombs rocked Baghdad, how his father, mother, and 2 aunts took turns to carry him and his baby sister, Najaf, Karbala, Baghdad, on foot after warnings of what would happen if they didn't leave, how they were stopped by Saddam's soldiers searching for rebels, how the men were separated from the women and children, how a soldier took pity on them and allowed them to keep walking, how they had no food but a few dates collected from palm trees by his father, who navigated decapitated bodies to reach them. He tells how years later they ran for their lives, leaving their family home of generations, how they had 24 hours notice in the form of a bullet-full front door. He tells how his grandfather's bookshop was wrecked by the car bomb in Al-Mutanabbi Street. He tells how he recognized the assistant, a scholar of Arabic, in the packed hospital by the single upper incisor in a sooty grin. Lord's mercy. He tells how the cafe owner at Shahbandar lost 4 sons and 1 grandson that day, how he had never heard such screams before. He tells how Al-Faqma ice cream parlour was blown up by a suicide bomber, how in one moment the chocolate ice cream trickling down the chin of a toddler turned into blood and ash, how their living room windows shattered, how smoke filled their front room. He counts how many times he stepped off a bus before it exploded, how they escaped Baghdad to Damascus for safety, how they escaped Damascus to Baghdad for safety. He takes a breath. But alhamdulillah, praise be to God, I am alive. Okay, so Iraq has had a lot of things happen, and from dictatorships to wars to sanctions to all the things that I've mentioned. So this poem is called Permission to Mourn the Death by Fire of Another Child in Iraq, and it's after a poem by Dylan Thomas. Never so busy is the trade of shroud making, nor birds green filled with smarter souls and jasmine flower. Childless fathers, opening eyes only to darkness, tell of each dawn breaking, and each empty room yearning for the just hour is only kept breathing by fate's harness, and such tragic cycles will ever go round as the seeker's prayers are spoken bead after bead. War, a greedier crop than corn, shall choose to silence joy's sound and sight, and replace each bright seed sown with ash, leaving black cloth to mourn. The only bliss the mother knows of the death her child had no time to fear such murder. Her heart can't beat if she knows another truth, nor can her lungs care for the next breath. Her air is underground, buried further. Elegy is recited again for this land's youth. Deep in blood, earth embraces her daughter. Robed in white, she will be joined by friends. Grief is the breath of each mother. Secrets of each living thing, from water which quenches fire's thirst, are whispered when the Tigris reminds the Thames, after every death is the next first death, every single other. It's been really good to be here. I'm going to share this last poem, just called The Love Letter. And it's a love letter after poems by Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawahiri, who was a famous Iraqi poet who died in exile in 1997. But this poem is not just for Iraq, it's for everywhere, it's for the world. The Love Letter, after Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawahiri. Beloved stranger, upon your hills be peace, and your birds and your moons and 2 rivers. There is such deep sorrow in your song of praise, beneath your clays and earths the bodies of lovers. Blessed are their tongues which spoke truth through pain, their dry throats once filled with dust, now light. Gardens live their sweetness, feed each fig and date in God's names. Blessed be your reed beds and palm trees, your curves and marshes. Since the grief you tasted, may you breathe the healing sought. May goodness flow from you, be solace for those who seek. Blessed be your skins and inks, the wisdom prophets taught, imbibe light through each leaf, each track, each breeze. Homeland, cradle, peace be upon you, be whole, be honored, be open, be still, peace for all.
I'll just start the second half with a short poem as part of a 2-part poem about flat home and steep home, and it's in the voice of steep home. I always used to think of steep. If you look at steep home from, say, Weston-super-Mare or Clifton, it always reminds me of Popeye the Sailor Man, which some of you are far too young to remember. Popeye the Sailor Man used to eat a can of spinach, squeeze a can, it would open because he was so strong, and the spinach would pop out, and he would swallow the spinach, and then he would show his muscles, and there would be a little bubble of a muscle there. And when we were kids, we always used to go around singing Popeye the Sailor Man and showing our muscles. And then when I look at steep home, it reminds me of that muscle on the horizon. So the first part of the poem is about steep home as a boxer, really, but the second half is still in the voice of steep home, and steep home looking at flat home. Flat. You tump, you molehill, you crusty cowpat, you burial mound, you dab, you scooped out crab, you fish cake, you Welsh cake on the river's griddle, you runt, you wart, you microbe, you mannequin, you caddock hassock, you pirate's piddle pot, you carbuncle of a barnacle on a belly-up coracle, you minuscule, you pipsqueak, you chip off the old Lavenock, you underling sibling, you flat pack, you short arse. depends the islands really.
Yeah.
Big brother and little brother, they're always fighting. Big sister and little sister, always fighting. So we're going to welcome Rhian Edwards. Rhian joins us from Bridgend today, where she lives with her daughter Megan, who's just stolen the spotlight in a photo shoot here. As well as being a brilliant poet, then Rhian is a musician as well. Has done hundreds of stage, festival, radio performances worldwide. She was first ever writer in residence at Aberystwyth Arts Centre back in 10 years ago now, 2013, and won the prestigious John Tripp Award for Spoken Poetry. It's prestigious in Wales, I know. Very prestigious. Rhian's first collection of poems, Clueless Dogs, won the Wales Book of the Year Award in 2013 and the Roland Mathias Prize for Poetry and Wales Book of the Year People's Choice for 2013. It was also shortlisted for the Forward Prize for the first book, Best First Collection. And then Rhian had a wonderful collection, a pamphlet called Brood, an illustrated pamphlet of bird poems containing original charcoal magpie drawings by Paul Edwards. There's a lot of Edwardses in South Wales, as some of you know. Jonathan Edwards kind of found a reason not to be here today, but Paul Edwards, no relation, but a beautiful collection. And then her second full collection, The Estate Agent's Daughter, was her National Poetry Day recommended read for 2020. All three books were published by Severn Books, which I say without hesitation is Wales' leading publisher of poetry and one of the top publishing houses for poetry in the UK. We do say that. But not being content with being published by Severn, Rhian has now become joint poetry editor of Severn, along with Zoe Brigley. So basically, The Estate Agent's Daughter, she's appeared in the house and now she's taken it over. So, Rhian Edwards, welcome to the floor.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you for inviting me as well, and to you as well, Sue. I'm going to be reading from my latest collection, The Estate Agent's Daughter. So you've got books like The Taxidermist's Daughter, The Glassblower's Daughter, but I'm actually the progeny of one of the most reviled, middle-class, mistrusted professions there is. So I've decided to take ownership of that fact. I returned to Wales about 14 years ago. I lived in London for 15 years, and when we return home, it's usually with our tail between our legs, I find. And I always swore I would never work for the estate agency, but I had no choice. And because of my proclivity for poetry, they thought I'd be better off drafting the property brochures. So my love affair with estate agent ease was then commenced, and especially the typographical errors and autocorrect as well. It's important to point out that my father was also very desperate to marry me off. So I imagined myself being a property brochure in the window. So this is the title poem, The Estate Agent's Daughter, and it goes like this. The estate agent's daughter is sold as seen, semi-detached. In walking distance of Pen, Abontarogor, all its mud cons, located in a quiet hammerhead. She has wrought iron gates, hard standing parking for two. Her pea gravel driveway sweeps to a cloudy apple composite door, stained window with leather detail. Her hallway is carpeted with sycamore seeds and cherry blossom throughout. White dogleg staircase with spindle gallery landing, which leads to a loft conversation with a skylight widow. Her ground floor comprises open plan lunge diner, recesses either side of her fire breast wall. Her oak writing desk has been nudged to the brink of the bay. Curtains may be drawn around her to quarantine at will. Her dining table moonlights a surrogate desk. Cable knit cardigans draped across the shoulders of IKEA chairs come as standard. Spider warding conkers mob her laminated corners in vain. She boasts a galley kitchen with splashback tiling and sunken spotlighting. integrated frigidity freezer, eye-level oven, rarely used, white goods to remain. The master bedroom is in dire need of updating. Juliet balcony in state of disrepair. Outside, she has a stone porch with power and lighting, chipped area to the side. The estate agent's daughter retains many original features. Coved ceiling, double gazing throughout, and suitable for first-time buyers. No ongoing change. This is the third time in my daughter's lifetime I've successfully coerced her in coming to a poetry reading. So I've decided to sanitize my set list today and turn it in, and I've actually curated it around my daughter to include all the poems about her. So this is a kind of like How I Met Your Father set list. Ordinarily it's How I Divorced Your Father, yeah, I need to change that record because, as we all know, divorce is a very tedious album. A lot of the poems I'm going to do are from the illustrated pamphlet Brood, which I wrote when I was pregnant with Megan, but they're also in the estate agent's daughter as well. You get way more poems, it's much better, value for money. So this one, I want to invite Megan up on stage for this one. So this is predicated on the magpie rhyme. When I was pregnant with Megan, I became obsessed with birds because I felt like I should know all the names of the birds before I had my daughter to impart this knowledge, because that's an essential part of mothering, I felt. And I became particularly obsessed with magpies because there's one, progeny's rife with them, and two, because they're so portentous as well. So Megan wanted to grace the stage today. So I'm going to ask, can I just say her types were fully intact before this poetry reading began, and now she looks like Susie Sue. So Megan, please come up and debrief everyone on the magpie rhyme to bring them up to speed.
1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, 8 for a kiss, 9 for a wish, 10 for a bird you would want to miss.
Well done, Diane. Round of applause. So I did meet my future husband. I'll be honest, my father probably wanted him to be white, Welsh and Presbyterian. That's what he said was his criteria. But instead I met an American on my first night when I went to New York, which is Megan's father. So this is 4 for a boy. And it goes like this. As foreign as a man could be, skin pale as a magpie's shoulder, black feathered hair, a skull cap of curls arranged in a chicanery of tenderness. He had a hooked Roman nose, aquiline, the Latin for eagle-like, the certitude of a curved beak that darted straight for the stage. He sang country with a spurious Texan twang, alien birdsong. He plucked his own strings harshly, souring the music, discording the smallness of his voice. I had him pegged as a midnight cowboy, freshly dismounted from the greyhound, what with his plaid shirt, weathered jeans, a belt buckle that made him a man of two halves. He lived sparse as a monk in that Manhattan apartment. He shampooed his hair with a bar of soap, boiled his coffee in a saucepan, a capsized wooden coke crate for a desk, a defeated dog on the couch. I found his coarseness winsome. I mistook his monosyllables for shyness. His kindness, his unkindness for grief, his incursion for love. Yet the metronomic pecking, the incidental score of us, came from a savage remoteness, a coldness that scaffolded a birdcage inside the hollow of the hooded nest. So while I was pregnant with Megan, and while I had this obsession with birds, and especially when I was in Aberystwyth, Have you all heard of the Mabinogion? Yeah. Which is like the ancient fairy tales of Wales. So my namesake, Rhiannon, is best known as the Queen of Horses, but she was also the Queen of Birds. And she was from the fairy world, the immortal world. But she fell in love with a man, so she had to quash her fairy gifts in order to be this domesticated and acceptable wife. The Birds of Rhiannon. Before I was mortal, I was haloed in feathers. A trinity of familiars whose birdsong was legend, serenading the dead from their dreams, lullabying the living to torpor. For the sake of this world and him, I swallowed my companions, let them nest in my belly and take turns in my throat. The sparrow became my repartee, my grappling chatter that flutters away the dead air. The mockingbird staked claim as my mimicking tongue, parodying the world as it heard it to be droll to belong. And the thrush was poetry, my child song, my verse voice, the brittle thread to my blueprint life. For the sake of my now world and him, I crowded my belly with children, each deafened in utero by the never-ending twittering. My birds heckled my unformed sons for mirroring the man that caged them within this ungenerous flesh. My unborn tried walling their ears, even taking their leave before they were finished. My pets pecked and fought over what remained. But now that a girl is unfurling, the facsimile of me, they're familiar. They coo and brood over her, sing her to flower, while laying eggs of their own under her unspeakable tongue. So I was very good at getting pregnant. I just wasn't very good at making it come to fruition. And I remember there's a theory that sometimes you can't carry a certain sex of child. And I just had the 20-week scan with Megan. And as you know, especially women who have had miscarriages, you dare not look forward to it just in case it's going to be another loss, you know. And I remember I just found out it was a girl and I was so thrilled and exhilarated. And I told a woman who knew I'd miscarried several times, and she said, that's the thing with girls, is they hang on. I want to show you a photo of the ultrasound here. I wasn't going to do this poem. I was on Radio Wales on Friday nights, and I was very shocked to find out the other poet who was on there was the National Poet of Wales, Hannah Issa, and she cited this poem as one of her favourite poems of all time, and that to me that was just the most touching compliment you can ever have as a poet. And so I'm going to show you the ultrasound because it's mainly based on that. You see, I did take a screenshot of it. What's incredible for all of those of you who've had ultrasounds is it's incredible how at 20 weeks in utero they look like the person they become. The features are there, you know. Where to is it now? There it is. So there she is. I'm quite happy to say she now has 2 legs and not a fish's tail anymore. I think she made a pact with Ursula the Sea Witch. And she's actually doing this. She's 20 weeks, she's world weary already. That's all I can infer from that. You know, really, it's the greatest both. So this is Hannah and Issa's choice, 3 for a Girl. And it was originally called The Reckoning. And I wrote this because I was walking the fields, Newbush Fields where I grew up, and I never anticipated I would end up back in the town where I was brought up. And there was a certain part of me that hated myself for going back because I always swore I never would. And there I was in the fields of my childhood, 3 for a Girl. I have been squandering the waxing trimesters in the fields where I was sown, a faltering scarecrow fending off the minstrel theatre of birds. There is no slighting or warding you, for you parade where you hatched, sedentary to the core, handicapped and blunted in your nerve to migrate. Now your Eton morning dress checkerboard gang colours have become my ultrasound, my skull theory, the noosed wedding ring swaying above my belly. I keep spying your tidings in triptych, a figure which clinches it, a girl in the gut, a damsel in the nest, helix behind the blanche of my own magpie paunch. The sonogram inches across the cold, stretched drum of my belly. It picks up the echo of a mermaid, a flailing of legs blurring into a fin. It hears the ghost of a snub nose, the spit of my own mouth, the temples of a head bridged by the arrow of a hand, the near certainty of a girl. Science christens the magpie's call, the coveted daughter, a second chance at myself, the reckoning of a wishing lash blown clean away from my finger. So soon after having Megan, my body started to malfunction when Megan was about 7 months old. And I think anyone who suffers from a chronic pain disease especially, you see it as your body betraying you. And I kept on going back to the doctors. First of all, it was my feet that went. I couldn't walk in the mornings. And then my writing hand just stopped working. And then my left hand was also on the wane. And I kept going back to the doctors. And it was a student, so it was the 5th time I went back to the doctors. And I said, could they in any way be related, these things? And it was a student doctor who was being filmed for his final assessment, who said, it sounds like you've got the textbook symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis. And I never knew you could get arthritis in your 30s. But it's really common. I think 90% of cases are women as well. And usually pregnancy and breastfeeding staves it off. So it's the natural way to stave off rheumatoid arthritis, being constantly pregnant. And so I had to go back to the doctors a lot. And I find describing pain is actually one of the hardest things, even as a poet, to describe. So the best thing I could do was to say what normal everyday things were suddenly nearly impossible. And this is called the abacus of stamina. There is the me who diarizes her day by rationing the stair climbs, who strews pillows like mock stepping stones to the sirening of the cot. There is the me who hangs her hands under the scalding water tap to recapture the fingers that are frozen perpendicular in the night. There is the me whose wrist vein bulges, whose knuckles are swollen vague, who cannot hoist a mug to her lips and uses a pushchair as a Zimmer frame. Where is the me who was a sprinter, a district tennis champion, who could scale the mile-end wall and slink up the rope in gym like a coconut cutter? There is the me who flounders with buttons, who cannot shell a tampon of its plastic, is unable to dangle her daughter by the ankles, and barely leaves an impression with her pen. So I don't think it's the same in England, but in Wales they start full-time education at the age of 3. And for a lot of people it's a very emotional day, the first day of school. And I was apoplectic because my hands wouldn't work that day. And so me and Megan's father, we went our separate ways when she was 15 months old. So we've been in a republic of 2 for the past 9 years. And there I was on the first day of term with my 3-year-old, and my hands just wouldn't work. And this is called The Art of Fastening, and I wrote this in response to the Vernon Watkins centenary. The Art of Fastening. These fingers are chopsticks, decrypting the riddle of buttoning your school blouse. My fumbles fall down the ladder of your shirt, trying to remaster the trick of twisting a flipping 4-eyed moons through hole. My 3-year-old tenders a helping hand, a starfish ham-fisted yanking at discs and thread. This only kindles the dread of these gutless fingers making stabs at sewing those buttons back on. Who knew the coiling of baubles around plaits could capsize me? The cat cradling between index and thumb could collapse under an elastic band's tension, now that hair must be tied to ward off lice. Before, your wardrobe was painless, your hair given free rein. It now takes a dexterity, a smiling sticker you have yet to earn, while my art of fastening fritters away. Now, this is a love letter to all the parents who have either struggled or who are now struggling in trying to get an insomniac child to sleep every night. And especially in one of those ridiculous toddler beds, so you're just curled up and scrunched up, exhausting your toolkit of trying to get them down. The other thing about this poem, because I was trying to meet the mnemonic rhyme with the magpies, is when my daughter was about 18 months old and she was learning to kiss. And normally kids, when they kiss, it's this kind of gobby, snotty affair, you know. But my daughter, she turned it into like a Barnum spectacle. And she'd go, mwah! And she'd do the jazz hands and everything. And that's how she kissed. And it was wonderful. So this is about this. 8 for a kiss. It was originally called the Prestige. It's just a number now. But it was the Prestige in terms of the denouement of a magician's trick. I am contorted in this pixie bed, querulous with your storytime heckling. It's okay, lovely. Answer it. It's okay. I am contorted in this pixie bed, querulous with your storytime heckling. Your hair-splitting curiosity, craving monikers for the anonymous, underwrought woodland chorus. You uncradle the night torch, shadow dinosaurs on the ceiling. I origami my palms into a pinned butterfly, still flapping for dear life, an unforgiving crocodile on the prowl. Your bare soles walk the primrose walls, cold as the rind of the retiring moon. You complain no matter how many times I tuck your feet back into the duvet, they kick off the blankets to freeze. Your slights of procrastination, delaying the damnation of bedtime, the bane of these pristine years, is why I lie beside you drafting magpies until your sleep is composed. I peck your apple cheek, dented with the dimples you inherited from no one. That Sid James chuckle nipping at the corners of your mouth, the rifts between your milk teeth. You sing your callow kiss, dawdling the drum roll of its hum, and you perch it with the flourish of a conjurer, unleashing the dove from the pan. Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic performance. Just amazing, and I just the fact that you can stand up there and remember every single word for a start and not have the words there like I do. Amazing, and every single poem gave me goosebumps, especially 3 for a Girl. And thank you, Megan, for remembering the rhyme for us. Amazing. Brilliant. So, yes, on to our next guest poet. I mentioned at the start that we've been running the online Speakeasy Poetry Nights since spring 2020, and our very first Speakeasy guest poet was Kat Lyons. So it gives us great pleasure to introduce Kat this afternoon. Kat is a queer writer, performer, workshop facilitator, and creative producer whose work is grounded in everyday politics and a love of storytelling. Kat is the current City Poet 2022 to 24 and has recently finished touring their debut solo show Dry Season, a spoken word theatre show exploring gender, age and menopause. Their debut poetry collection, Love Beneath the Nails, is published by Verve Poetry Press. Kat performs throughout the UK and was nominated for the 2022 Jerwood Poetry in Performance Award, and their collaborative animated poetry film Duvet Days was selected as part of the official programme at Zebra Poetry Poetry Film Festival 2022. Kat is passionate about using storytelling to connect and reconnect people to themselves, each other and the environment. As an example of how they get their message across, Kat once dressed up as a space explorer and rode around on an electric stegosaurus harassing the public. So we're pretty confident that Kat won't be harassing you this afternoon, but I can't be too sure. So welcome to Kat.
Yeah, it's amazing what you end up getting paid to do, isn't it? My careers tutor definitely didn't mention electric stegosauri when, I think they said administration or English teacher, so I think I came on top. I've got a book. Woo! I don't have a matching hoodie yet, but I am going to get a t-shirt printed because I really love the cover. It's very cool. I'm going to hold it because then subconsciously, you see, it's like a Trojan horse slipping into your brain to remind you to buy it afterwards. Also because I have chronic insomnia, which is just a joy, and so sometimes the words are just not in my head, but luckily they're in my book. So I'm going to do a couple of poems from my show, which is also in here, luckily, otherwise I'd have to bring a script. And then a couple of poems that aren't in the show, and then a Bristol City poem, because I probably have to do that because I'm just a city poet. Thank you to all the other poets who have come before me. You're all wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hopefully I will not bring down the tone too much.
Oh, go on.
Can't possibly do it more than Caleb already. This is called Are You Sitting Comfortably? I'm not looking at cat videos on my phone while I'm meant to be working. I am. I've got my timer on. Just honestly. Just a small cat video. Let me tell you a story. It's about a girl. This girl has hair as pale as hay and skin like fallen snow. She has skin as dark as walnut juice and hair black as a crow's wing. Sometimes she grows it long, lets it down for princes to climb. Sometimes her hair, her long, bright hair, her long, too beautiful hair catches the eye and snags on the thorns of powerful men. Sometimes she twists free. Sometimes she goes exploring. She is uncharted territory. She is the woodcutter's daughter, the miller's daughter, the merchant's daughter, the magician's daughter, the king's daughter. To be honest, it doesn't really matter whose daughter she is, as long as she is accounted for. She is so beautiful that the stars want to touch her. She is plain and good-hearted, dutiful and pious, quick-witted and bold. She will gamble away her birthright, shed her shining tail and walk on knives for a chance at love. She is foolish and will not be told. She wears dresses sewn with pearls. She wears her brother's clothes, she veils her skin, but no matter what she wears, she always wears too little or too much. She is always too big or too small. She is always too hot or too cold and never just right. She wears sackcloth and ashes, goes barefoot, runs from the party at midnight, limping lopsided in her single mirrored shoe. She hides her face and buries her name. She buries her treasure. One day she will bury her dead. She wraps herself in scarlet and walks into the wood to talk to wolves. And she walks through the world and through the stories, and she turns her unlined face towards the future, and she is young, and she is young, and she is always young. And when she's not, after the kissing, the dancing, the wedding, the chairs up on the tables now, and the guests have staggered home, drunk on novelty. And she's barely out of the oven, and already she's getting stale. Thank you. So, chronic insomnia, stemming.
Sorry, could you be just a little louder?
Bit louder?
We don't want to miss a word.
Okay, sure, I shall. I will. So, chronic insomnia, which I have, but didn't have a few years ago, and then developed randomly. But apparently that was because of premature menopause, which I did not know I had either, but that was the joy. And so the whole play dry season came out of that. Because, you know, you might as well get some Arts Council money out of a personal tragedy, might you? Sweetens the deal a bit. Creative people and communities. So this one is called Definitive. Yeah, and this is from the play as well. 1. Etymology. From the Greek, periodos. Originally used in Middle English to describe the time taken for an event or incident to be completed or to end. For example, an illness. You didn't tell me you were leaving. Or maybe you did, but not loud enough or clear enough. Or you spoke in a foreign language and I didn't understand and I kept waiting for you. Any day now. Any day now. Till it was clear you'd gone. 2. A noun. A measure of time. For example, she experienced regular periods of depression. If I'd have known, maybe I'd have done things differently. Thrown a party, opened a bottle of the good stuff, red, of course. Shown my appreciation in libations and burnt offerings. Your presence sweetened by your absence waiting just behind the door. But probably not. You were always a bit of a pain, and I have always made shrines from memories. The past is fat, flickering candles, communion wafers melting on my sacrilegious tongue while time skipped by. Inhaled casually, tossed into my gasping mouth like popcorn, slipping through my prayer-distracted hands. 3. Adjective. From or displaying typical attributes of a past historical time. For example, a well-preserved period house in need of attention. The door is locked now. And the doctor said my horse had bolted long ago. I never heard the hoofbeats. Guess I wasn't listening. Maybe I thought it was rain, or distant thunder, or another nature-based symbol of my inherently earthy feminine sensuality, which is so wild it can apparently only be properly encapsulated in a constant flow of Facebook memes featuring sunsets, mountains, and older white women looking pensive in autumn-coloured wool. Or maybe I had my earphones in. Deliberately, ostentatiously, like I do when passing building sites or groups of men on corners. 4. Informal. Used in conversation to show that any further discussion is undesirable and will not be entered into. For example, this conversation is over now, period. Your lack resonates louder than that clock I never heard. I ignored the lunar tug that snagged and caught and finally unravelled from inside my labyrinth, that bloody scheme. It happens. We wear down gradually, expose the bedrock of our biology. Beneath it, we are small, soft, pale from unaccustomed light. We curl into ourselves and squint, waiting to adjust to the glare, the empty space. 5. Grammatical. A punctuation mark. A full stop. Thank you. So my mum died a while ago. It's okay, you don't have to run for the doors. It's not going to be one of those poetry sets. I've done my therapy, and these are not my therapy. These are my poems. You don't ever know they're burned, those ones. You write about what you know, and then big things happen. You write about that, and then turns out that loads of people have gone through the thing that you think only you can possibly imagine because it's so huge and enormous. And then grief. It's a bugger, isn't it? But yeah, time also. Grief and time. Basically, the book. I'm going to read a poem now because I put it all in the poems rather than the bit before the poems. This is called After the Funeral. It's not as depressing as it might originally sound. January. My grief and I come home. We eat toast and peanut butter for the protein. Drink tea and boil the kettle dry. We are scolded by the steam. We sit on the sofa, which is too small for both of us. I read. Grief fidgets until I stop. April. I take my grief to the park. The field is mud. The mud is licked with bright new grassy tongues. In the ornamental bed we kneel among crocuses. I plant my fingers, whisper, how does it feel to root, to hide a portion of yourself inside the earth? June. On weekends we go walking to the river. Our kicked stones cause ripples, our tongues turn minnows into whales. My grief points out the kingfisher, a brief blue lantern, flashing like a siren, or maybe a lighthouse. August. I take my grief to the beach and leave it huddled on the blanket with my clothes. Breath locked behind my teeth, I count down into mute submersion, waiting to be rolled between the palms of sea and sky. November. My grief comes down to the harbour side, and we play Which Boat Is Mine? I want them all. Imagine bite-sized mornings delivered through portholes. When we leave, I'll take the helm while grief casts off. It's good at ropes and knots, the making, the undoing. January. My grief grows shabby, edges smoothed by touch. Eventually it fits in my back pocket. This curled up, sharp-toothed stub. I try to remember to check before sitting down, and pockmarked by all the moments I forget. Thank you. Yeah, that started off as a children's story that I was drawing with a giant, big monster grief that eventually became like this little, tiny little thing grief that used to sit in your pocket. But I think it's better as a poem, at least for now. Maybe I'll do it again in a different way. So what have we got on the time? 13. Okay, so from funerals to paranoid anxiety. Oh, it's a barrel of laughs, this poetry, isn't it? You're stuck with me now, I'm on the stage. It's rude to leave. So this is kind of a symbolic poem. I have a good relationship with my dentist. Well, I did before they closed, and now there's no others. So yeah, if you do know an NHS dentist, call me after the event and tell me. But yeah, it's kind of symbolic, which is kind of a lie, but also not a lie. It's a bigger truth. A wide. So paranoid anxiety plus grief means that the thing that you really should be thinking about is the thing that your brain absolutely will not think about, and instead it will think about socks and your tax return and the spoon drawer and the cables that you just don't know what they are, and all of the things in order to not think about the thing that you should be processing in order to become a fully functioning human again. So this is called cavity. I like to dedicate this to my therapist, thank you. Cavity. I brush my teeth in the bathroom. I am an adult, and this is what we do. We have clean teeth that speak of routine, that shine with organisation, so I brush my teeth for 2 minutes after breakfast and before bed. I time it with a stopwatch on my phone. I am still not responsible enough. I brush my teeth and use a special plastic stick in the crevices where dirt hides morning and evening. I brush after meals, I brush after snacks, I brush between those times. I've learnt fractions are infinite. Anything can be split with a thin enough wedge. I brush my teeth in a repetitive circular motion with my toothbrush held at a 45-degree angle to my gums, just like the leaflets advise. I buy a protractor to measure the angle. Precision is important. Health is a serious business. I'm told this by serious men. I brush my teeth, and every time I pass a mirror, I peel my lips back like a nervous mare. Do they shine yet? It's hard to tell beneath the blood, but I imagine they're glowing. I brush my teeth and check my progress in reflective surfaces. My swollen face wallows in spoon bellies, peers up at me from puddles before the red drops shake it free. I brush, and in between I practice saying serious things with my raw mouth. It's hard to fit the words around my tongue grown thick with adulthood, my throat crammed with vitamins and ballpoint pens and magnetic whiteboards and packs of nail files and plastic-free razors, spare chargers for electrical devices and SPF 30, even on cloudy days, and labelled packets of leftovers in the freezer, and so much more economic in the long run. People don't understand what I'm saying. I'm choking. I've worn away my voice to pristine silence. I've worn away the bristles and my gums, but still I brush, and when I bite down now with what were teeth, the whole world tastes of iron and gleams. Thank you. Maybe I do one after this, we'll see. Do a happy one-ish after this one. This was written as a City Poet Commission to commemorate the arrival of the Windrush, the first Windrush arrivals, and the Windrush generation as a whole. And there's some commissions as a city poet you can choose, and there are some commissions that you're given. And so I was given this one, and I was like, okay, that sounds great. I'd like to collaborate with someone. And then they're like, oh no, that sounds great, but there isn't the budget. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, my positionality as a white middle-class poet who isn't even from Bristol, I was a bit like, I don't know. It became quite tricky to figure out how to tell this in an authentic way, but as myself, but without co-opting someone else's story and it feeling still real. So I decided to use 1950s etiquette manuals, and hopefully, as you'll see, they came from a 1950s manual called How to Be a Good Hostess, and it was originally printed in the 1950s for the British company Spiller's Flour and given out free so that you could be a good hostess at home while making bats or something. Oh, and just so you know, there's a little note on the text. I've even got footnotes for this, it's so fresh. Pardon a hand is referenced. Now, pardon a hand is spelled P-A-R-D-N-E-R, like partner, but partner, is an informal community-based savings scheme that originated in the Caribbean and was brought over here because of the sort of systemic financial discrimination that the Windrush generation faced, where they couldn't get loans, they sometimes couldn't get bank accounts. So instead, Pardon a Hand allowed the community to come together, hold their wages and pool them in order for somebody to pull out from the group pool. They'd be able to pull out, deposit for a car or a new suit for a job interview, and so the community supported itself to thrive. And because the British institutions wouldn't support them. Anyway, this is called When You Visit a Relative's House. A written invitation is always in good taste. Motherland leans from posters, turns to you in movie theatres holding a perfumed bouquet of jobs. Come, she says. Her promises gleam golden with opportunity, brighter than the light on the sea. The polite guest makes an effort with their appearance. You are polished, where the sun inside your skin, the Caribbean stitched into your seams, your sharp suit cut from a different cloth. Journalists point out the excessive expense, the extravagant tailoring, your surprising respectability. The good hostess's house literally shines out a welcome to her guests. Britannia does not wash the curtains for your visit, does not wash her dirty linen, does not wash her mouth out with soap, does not polish the brass or dust the china ornaments on her mantelpiece. You wiped your feet so carefully, and still she tries to scrub your shadow from the white stones of her doorstep. Your hostess will appreciate a small and thoughtful gift. You bring clever hands still curled from gripping salt-sprayed railings. You bring calloused palms held open for fortune to cross. You bring years of experience in trades, in professions, in the forces. You bring your future to the table to share. Your hostess will take your coat, your silk scarf, fedora hat, your energetic youth, your qualifications, your high ideals. She sets them down at a factory bench, on a building site, by a sink in a hotel kitchen. The attentive hostess will make sure that all her visitors feel at home. After streets of shuttered faces, you find welcome. There's always room in the broken-nosed terraces of St. Paul's for one more optimist. Within damp walls warmed by fellowship, you breathe out, move forward, steady yourself on outstretched partner hands. Make certain that your guests know what they should wear. No longer blown windward, you have learned to dress for the weather. These days you pull on a thick skin, Button your winter coat over your shirt and tie, your pristine nurse's dress. A bus driver's uniform waits at the back of the wardrobe for you to pull it out, put it on. You may dispense with formalities with relations or in close company. Later, you grow callaloo and children, plant your feet and dig. Beneath the concrete lies the green and pleasant land she promised, a common wealth to run your fingers through. Whatever treasure this country holds is burnished by your touch. Thank you.